Hello, and welcome to CIF 45 Stream's Filmmaker Conversations. I'm Mallory Martin, the Artistic Director of the Cleveland International Film Festival. We want to give special thanks to PNC for sponsoring our Filmmaker Conversations. On today's special Q&A session, we'll be joined by some very special guests from the documentary Not Going Quietly, which just won the Documentary Audience Award at South by Southwest. Congrats. And which is in our new Democracy's Heroes sidebar, celebrating activists, community organizers, and the heroes fighting for democracy around the world. I'm honored to introduce the director and cinematographer, Nicholas Bruckman, and lawyer, activist, co-founder of the Be a Hero PAC, organizer for the Center for Popular Democracy, disruptor, amateur comedian, husband, father, and the subject of the documentary, Not Going Quietly, Adi Barkan. Thank you so much to both of you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Mallory. It's a fantastic intro. Great to be here. We're really glad to bring the audiences the movie to Cleveland.
So I'm not gonna lie, it's a lot of pressure to interview you both after you were just interviewed by Jimmy Kimmel. So hopefully I don't totally screw it up, and I'll try my best not to cry. Adi, I'd love to start with you. Though I feel like I could ask you a million questions, I'm really most curious about how your family's doing, how are Rachel, Carl, and Willow, and what life has been like during the pandemic during the last year for all of you.
We're all very lucky to be safe from the virus. It has been a scary time. 3 of my caregivers got infected as well as our nanny, and because I require 24-hour care, we couldn't fully lock down. Rachel and I received our first dose a few weeks ago, but there are many folks in other states with underlying conditions and disabilities who have not yet been made eligible for the vaccine. Naturally, as an organizer, I think of how we can ensure equitable distribution of the vaccine. We need to call and write to our elected officials in Congress to fund public vaccine manufacturing now. And we need to pressure members of Congress to support the TRIPS waiver so that intellectual property monopolies that enrich big pharma don't block the rest of the world from making these life-saving vaccines. We can't end the pandemic if we don't end it everywhere.
Adi, can you talk a little bit about fatherhood now that you're a father of 2 kids, and some of the ups and downs and what that's been like for you?
100 times every day, I despair at my inability to tickle and chase my kids, to help them build towers and train tracks, to bellow and headbang alongside them, to make messes together and then clean them up, to read stories and tell jokes, to comfort them in the middle of the night. This is not an easy disease to have. But the way I've made my peace with that is to accept those feelings. This just isn't going to feel fair or fun, to me. And I have to be okay with that. So it is both about Carl and Willow and about my political worldview. As a father, I really feel strongly that we are at a crossroads in this country. We can be a society that puts profits above all else, and which is willing to throw people's health and livelihoods under the bus simply to maintain a profitable status quo for a handful of executives. Or, we can choose a different path, and inhabit a future where everyone can live with dignity and has the basic resources they need to thrive. I know which choice I want our society to make, and I know which world I want my children to grow up in. Fatherhood has impacted my activism, and it's a big part of why I still fight so hard. I want Willow and Carl to grow up in a better world.
Thank you, Adi. Nicholas, you just won the Documentary Audience Award at South by Southwest. You've got a powerful team behind this film, including executive producers Bradley Whitford and Mark and J.J. Potts. What do you hope this film will do next?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mallory. I'm always still a little intimidated after Adi's amazing odes to democracy that he manages to wedge into every answer about the most personal thing. But we do have a really great team behind us. And, first and foremost, I want to make sure to shout out a lot of other folks on the project, namely the producer, Amanda Roddy, our editor, Kent Bassett, the whole team at People's TV, which is the production company we doing social justice films. And that's the capacity in which I met Adi. We were actually brought on to tell a story about the Be a Hero movement, a kind of short form launch film. And so I flew out to Santa Barbara and interviewed him. And I thought this was going to be a kind of sad and somber shoot, to be honest, like, oh, sick dad asking for healthcare. It's going to be like this kind of Sally Struthers tear jerking, plea. And I went out and, with it, I was just, laughing hysterically, and we're basically smoking a joint the night that I met him. And I told Adi, there's a bigger story here. It was his humor. It was his kind of, I don't want to say ironic, but really, compassionate and real look at what he was going through, and his ability to see how it could be transformed into something positive that made me want to do a longer film and really break out of just making a little political ad to doing what is really a warts and all story. And we talked really early on that this is going to have to really show the darkest and the most difficult and challenging parts of ALS and expose that. And I think the reason that he agreed is because he realized, partly through this interaction with Jeff Flake that went viral, that his story could really make a difference. And this whole idea of telling your personal story to people in power, which is what we do as documentary filmmakers, could matter. And I'm really grateful he did agree. It was a really difficult process, I think, for him and his family to let us into their life in this way, and for him to share a lot of the pain that he's, and difficulty. But I hope the movie is also really, really joyous and a celebration of fatherhood, a celebration of activism, and all of Adi's humor, I think, really lights the torch for activism as a joyful and celebratory act. And so in terms of what I want this film to be and do next, of course, we want to make it a tool for activists. We, in the film, you see Adi do this amazing tactic of bird dogging politicians, which is really the act of telling your story to people in power, confront them, shame them, make them aware of what the people are going through, and eliminate that barrier between the representatives and the represented. And that's what I want the film to do. I'd really love to take this out and make it an actual training tool for how to be an activist, which is something the film shows and something Adi's whole life shows. And so that's going to be a big part of what we do this year. Even with Cleveland, we're doing an impact screening with the Leadership Center with folks in the Cleveland community to hopefully inspire them around engaging around issues of civic action and democracy building in Cleveland. And of course, from a policy standpoint, and I'll let Adi be the one to talk about this, we think this film really, and Adi's story, really makes the case for universal health care, which has, for the first time in maybe a generation, a real path forward, and is currently under the Biden administration and under certain progressive leaders in Congress who Adi has championed and who have championed Adi, could make it a reality in our lifetimes. And if there's a legislative victory that we want to achieve and we want this film to shine a light on through Adi's story, it's Medicare for All.
That's wonderful. Nick, do you remember off the top of your head when you're doing the Q&A, with the other Q&A with the Cleveland Leadership Center? We'll put it in the
not off the top of my head, but we just spoke to that team yesterday. Adi, there's a great civic action organization. I didn't mention you, and we didn't rope you into that one as well as spare you, but we're doing kind of an impact screening with 100 members of the Impact Center at Cleveland, and that should be really, really great.
Yeah, it is. And we'll make sure to promote that too, and add that to this information for anybody who's watching this to know about as well. So Nick, you were talking about activism, of course, but to me, this film is not only, of course, a testament to Adi's activism, but everything that he's gone through with the disease, but it's such a love story too. And can you talk for a second about the balance as a filmmaker between sort of the intimate and inspirational moments in the film, which you did an amazing job at? Can you talk about how that balance was created and if that was a challenge for you as a filmmaker?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. And I think it was a big challenge in the sense that what Adi's going through is obviously very difficult. And I think there's a clear idea that one might pity him or feel like sad or bad about him. And that's not a movie that any of us want to see. And it's also not a movie that would inspire people to action. And I think Adi's unwillingness to be that is what has made his work and his activism so effective. And so, I think it was really important for us, not only that the film show Adi and as a father and as a friend and show his best friends, but also that it really show that activism is fun. And so the main arc of the film is this really joyous road trip of a bunch of young people having kind of the best summer of their lives on the road. And that wasn't something I designed or pitched as a filmmaker. That was Adi's way, of building this powerful community and this powerful organization, the Be a Hero Fund, but also a way of really bringing, the power to the people. And so that provided the arc of the film. And honestly, before we knew that road trip was going to happen, it wasn't quite clear what the narrative would be. Adi's going to, get sicker, or, where's the, what's going to be the driving force. And so Adi's decision to do that, led to what I think created that kind of intimate connection. And of course, the stakes of him leaving his family to do that at such a critical moment in his life, I think provided for a lot of the drama in the story. So I don't want to, basically, I'm not taking credit for it. Adi's whole work is about drawing attention to the political through the personal. And again, all of the activists that you see in the film, that's what they're doing. They're going out armed with cell phone cameras and making their personal political. And so, I hope the film is kind of the message is the medium and achieving what I think is an effective tool for activism.
Right. And Adi, I'm going to ask you a personal question too. What was that like for you and Rachel specifically as a couple, as new parents, opening up at such a vulnerable time in your life?
Through this process, Nicholas and the crew at People's TV have become part of our extended family. Opening up our lives to a TV crew is of course deeply vulnerable and also slightly exciting because I grew up in the reality TV boom of those juicy closet confessionals on MTV. I am very much looking forward to my red carpet debut. On a more grounded note, I learned as an organizer and activist for racial and economic justice, long before my ALS diagnosis, that it is through collective struggle that we can find personal liberation. I could transcend my dying body by hitching my future to yours. Together we could go forward in pursuit of a different world. I want to know that I did everything that I could to do what I can to make society more just and equitable. And if that means using all that is at my disposal, well, ALS is unfortunately very much at my disposal. So if publicly sharing my life with ALS will help us ensure a future with Medicare for all, where no one dies or goes bankrupt because of their lack of health care, then that's what I'm going to do.
Adi, your friend Jake Coton, I think maybe is how you say his last name, and his wife in the film, they mentioned how your work, and I think some of the work that they were doing was a labor of love, and that it's hard enough to live with the disease, let alone advocate for it. Do you think, you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but do you think your advocacy has helped you to navigate the trauma of your disease and in some ways almost acted as a distraction for you?
Living with ALS is not easy. I did not arrive at this place of acceptance easily. A lot of days are hard. But I think coming face to face with my own mortality has sharpened my focus on what really matters. I want to know that I've done everything I possibly could to leave this world better than I found it. Being part of a movement fighting to make our country more fair and more just has given me an important sense of purpose. It's given me a community, and most importantly, it's given me the chance to help nudge our society in the right direction, whether that's by touring the country getting people to vote last year or testifying in front of Congress about the need for Medicare for all. And I honestly think those are things that aren't just for me because that purpose, that opportunity to give back, these are things available to everyone who becomes part of the fight for a more just society. It's tremendously rewarding, and if you've considered getting involved but haven't for whatever reason, I would urge you to just do it. You won't regret it.
So we talked about them a little bit as well already, but there's almost a secondary love story in the film too, and that's the one between Adi and his campaign team that you so greatly captured, Nick. Adi, you seem to attract some pretty incredible people in your life, both to yourself as a person, but also to your mission. Can you talk about some of your team members and what they might be up to currently?
Some of your team members and what they might be up to currently. Some of my comrades are featured in the movie, which makes me so happy. One is Liz Jaff, who I met in the most lucky and serendipitous moment of my life, standing in line to board an airplane. The film tells that story, and shows the beautiful and wild partnership that emerged from that magical moment. We have been fighting together ever since, and it has been a wonderful friendship. One of the issues that Liz and I and the Be a Hero team are working on now is home and community care. We believe that everyone in America should have the right to home health care if they need it. Everyone should be able to stay in their home, with the people they love, rather than having to go live in a nursing home. So, we're urging President Biden and the Democrats in Congress to make that a guaranteed right in America. When I talked to him last year, Joe Biden promised me that he would do that, and so I am working to hold him to his word this year.
Great. Speaking of Liz, I love the part in the film where Liz is asked about whether she's exploiting Addie's disease for political gain, and her response is absolutely. I just thought it was perfect and very fitting to her personality. So Nick, my question is actually for you though. Did you and your team ever question that yourself, or did people question you along the way, and what's your response to that?
Yeah, I love that line as well. And I think it speaks very, very directly to Liz's core personality. It kind of sums her up in the word absolutely. And it was really important for me to include that because what I really wanted to do with the film is not just expose ALS or show that Addie is a heroic figure, but actually try to take apart the nuts and bolts and look under the hood of how a movement is built, of how a political movement is built, of how activism happens, and try to demystify that process for people who might think that it's unattainable or something that activists do. And I think Liz's kind of no bullshit answer there absolutely is yes, we are exploiting his disease for political gain. And of course, the Republicans and the, those who oppose universal health care and all the other progressive things we're trying to champion exploit every instance of these personal stories for political gain. And so the answer is yes, I did think that many times. And the ownership of that and the embracing of that we're exploiting it for political gain is something that I think is important and not something to run away from. So Liz's ability to be real about that, I think, is a big part of the message of the film, that we are using our messages to advance agendas that are going to make people's lives better in all the policies Addie's been talking about during this interview. And so I wanted to make sure that by showing the reality of how a story can be converted into a message, into a movement, the way they have, that it makes activism feel more accessible and it makes it feel more real. And I hope that when people see the film and see this kind of no nonsense, no bullshit approach, it makes them realize this is something I can be a part of too on the issues that I care about.
Well said. Addie, you started the Be a Hero campaign. Last year, you held the national and international stage when you gave your inspirational speech on day 2 of the DNC. And soon thereafter, you were named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people, which all elevated your role in shaping the national conversation about healthcare. But politically, we're at a little bit of a different place than we were when you finished the film. Obamacare seems to be a little safer. Biden just recently extended the enrollment period. Pandemic relief bill expanded Obamacare for 2 more years. So my question for you, Addie, is what do you see as the most crucial and pressing issue around healthcare reform at this point in time? And what should we be asking senators about on airplanes?
Great question, and my answer is simple. The most pressing issue around healthcare right now is that it is not a guaranteed human right for every person living in the United States of America. In the richest nation in history, 30 million people still don't have any health insurance, and millions more are underinsured, and too often find themselves going bankrupt because insurance companies refuse to cover the cost of necessary care. Our system is a moral abomination and will only be changed through a truly ambitious, radical departure from the status quo that replaces the exploitative for-profit model with one that guarantees health care to everyone. The singular solution I've seen that guarantees health care as a right is an expansion of the Medicare system to cover everyone, otherwise known as Medicare for All. My question for the senators, which you all who still fly on airplanes can ask, is thus, do you believe health care is a human right, or a privilege that should be reserved for the wealthy few? And second, if you believe health care is a human right, will you commit now to aligning your beliefs with your policy proposals and support Medicare for All?
I will be writing those 2 questions down after this. And bird dogging, Nick, you described it a little bit already. The film goes into detail about it. Adi, do you still believe that this is the most effective form of political change? And do you have advice about what else citizens can do?
Bird dogging, essentially asking politicians a question on the spot, is one way of holding them accountable to the people they represent, but it is not the only way. There are many ways for people, not even just citizens, to get involved in strengthening our democracy and making our country a more just place. If you're eligible, vote. Stay informed about what our political leaders are doing and talk about it with your community, both on and offline. Join grassroots organizations fighting for justice at every step of government, from the local to the federal level. Follow what moves you to make our country a more just and equitable place, and do whatever you can to help bring it to fruition.
Thank you, Adi. Adi, though all your work seems to be intersectional, of course, before focusing more on healthcare reform, you were also advocating heavily for racial and economic justice, as you had stated earlier. Can you share your thoughts on what this last year of protesting has done for our country? Do you see any real progress towards a more equitable future, whether it's through healthcare justice or beyond?
The protests and massive uprisings in the movement for Black lives this past year has forced more of us to confront our white supremacist culture and build momentum for the movement for change and justice. We beat back the election of a fascist president. This is all good, but we have a ways to go until we reach a truly equitable future, so we must not give up now. The progressive movement is stronger and more united than ever, and if we capture hearts, minds, and voters, we have the power to bring about racial, economic, and healthcare justice through ambitious and groundbreaking legislation, such as Medicare for All, a Green New Deal, and Supreme Court reform, for example.
Yeah, and Adi, the film closes out with the news that now President Biden has committed to expanding government funding of biomedical research for diseases like ALS. I know you already said that you're holding him accountable, some other things that he committed to as well. Can you talk specifically about whether that has happened yet, if he is bringing funding to this research, and if you care to share any last insights on policy change that's happened or that might be on the horizon?
Biden's recently announced plan for jobs and infrastructure includes $400 billion for home care for elderly and disabled people, which is critical for people like me who rely on professional caregivers to survive. The American Rescue Plan had $5 billion for biomedical research, but only research related to COVID-19. We need more funding for diseases like ALS, and I will continue to push President Biden to make good on the promise he made in his interview with me to spend another $50 billion on biomedical research over the next several years. I personally do not believe that is enough, but will hold him to it and continue to push for more, because my life, and that of so many others, depends on it. On the horizon, the organization I founded with Liz Jaffe, Be a Hero, is gearing up to support upcoming legislation to implement Medicare for All at the state level, including in California, where CalCare could pave the way for a model of guaranteed health care across the country. We're also supporting campaigns to fund professional caregivers at the home, so no person has to enter a nursing home or institution, where outcomes for quality of life, care, and health are much worse than if people are able to stay at home with family.
So Adi, my last question for you is a pretty simple one. Is there anything in particular that's giving you hope these days?
For me, hope is not a state of mind. Hope is a state of action. I'm hopeful because each day, as long as I am able, I wake up and fight for a better healthcare system and a more just society. I work in solidarity and love with people who are also laboring to heal our beloved community. I am supported in struggle by my brilliant wife and our two incredible children. Activism has given me a sense of agency and purpose, despite the paralyzation of my body, to fight for a brighter world for my children to grow up in. Having a terminal illness makes clear what is controllable in this life and what is not. It is actually within our collective power to bring about a better world, and I believe in our ability to do so if we band together and work diligently toward justice. Each of us can choose whether to take up the call and make hope real in the world.
Thank you, Addie. You almost got me there. I teared up a little bit for a second, but I got it. And Nick, my last question for you is, having followed Addie over the course of 3 years, I imagine quite a bit how to end up on the cutting room floor. Were there any key moments along the journey that you wish you could have included in the film?
Yeah, there's plenty. We shot for, over 400 hours, and there was, everything from the slapstick to when the RV got flooded with shit and had to stop on the side of the road for a day, to many more poignant moments with all the people in the film. And I think there's two things that really didn't get told in the story that I hope we get the opportunity to through Addie's work and through the outreach with the film. And one is the story of Addie's work before the film begins. Obviously, people know Addie and the work he's done post ALS, but Addie has more than a decade of incredible activism before that, fighting across so many social and racial justice issues. We had to condense his whole life into 3 minutes because what he does after he gets ALS is so incredible, but it's really built when he confronts Jeff Flake and has that conversation with him. He's not what the media showed of this sick dad, talking to this politician with no background. He had been preparing for that moment his whole life. And that work that he'd done really informed a lot of what you see in the film and what Addie's working on now. And, I hope people get to learn more about his story. If you are interested, I recommend purchasing a copy of Eyes to the Wind.
Prequel, baby.
One more, I stepped over you, Addie.
He's saying it's time for a prequel, baby.
Prequel, hell yeah. Awesome. Can you give us one more prequel, baby, where I'm not talking over you so they can get that? I'm sorry.
We need a prequel, baby.
Awesome. Okay, sorry, I know the joke's not as good on the third try. But I'll say briefly that the other thing about the story that's super important is that it's really, of course, Addie is the one not going quietly, but there's a lot of other activists in the film, and it really is the portrait of a movement. What Addie does is so extraordinary, but Liz has an amazing backstory. She comes from a family of anti-apartheid activists from South Africa. Addie's who could have deserves her own film. In Addie's best friend, Nate, they have an incredible relationship that spans decades and a love story for the ages that should be told as well. Addie's wife, Rachel, is an amazing author, and she really played a big role in the Be a Hero campaign in ways that we didn't have time to show in the film. And of course, the other activists, Tracy Corder, Ana Maria, do amazing work for racial immigrant justice, respectively, all of using the same tactics and sort of school of thought and change, school of change that Addie comes from. And so all of them deserve airtime that I don't think we were able to do justice to in the film. And the hardest thing to know is where to stop the film, because I truly believe that Addie's best work is ahead of him. You see in the film that he helps win the midterms in 2018. We see the work he does in 2020, pushing the presidential candidates and helping set a progressive agenda and even setting the stage for the Biden presidency. But what the film is about is not just winning elections, but about bringing social movements into power, into the places of power. That's what this bird dogging tactic is all about. And that's the work that Addie's really getting started with his team doing this year, and all the issues he talked about, whether CalCare at the local level or fighting nationally for Medicare for all. And so I'm hopeful that this film really lets people know about the Be a Hero movement and the work they're doing. And I know that there's going to be a lot more storytelling that they and hopefully we will be doing together about the work he has yet to come.
It's great. We definitely look forward to the prequel and sequel. Hopefully we can play with it. All right, well, I'd like to close out with two things that you said during the film, Addie, that still stick with me and I think will stick with all audiences. First, the importance of breaking down barriers between the represented and the representatives. Because I think we so often forget that we are the represented and we need to keep questioning how we want to be represented. So I just loved that. And lastly, in one of your speeches, you said, "I'm willing to give my last breath to save democracy." What are you willing to give? And I just like for everyone watching right now to let that sink in and to take that question with you. That's one thing from the film that I will constantly remember and keep asking myself as well. So, well, I can't thank you both enough for spending your time with us today. and for sharing your film with us. It was just an honor and a pleasure to get to meet both of you.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Be well.
Thank you so much, Mallory and Danny, and thank you, Adi, for taking time to be a part of this. We're really excited to share the film with your community.
I'd like to thank you, our audience, for joining us for today's Q&A session. We wouldn't be here without your ongoing support to bring film home. Please consider supporting our challenge match to support the future of our festival. Our goal is to reach $145,000 this year, and we're so grateful for any amount you're able to contribute. To donate, purchase tickets, or check out our full schedule of filmmaker conversations like this one, please visit clevelandfilm.org. And with that, please stay safe, stay healthy, and in the words of Adi Barkan, peace out, motherfuckers.
Peace.